Welcome to this new automotive news video for Friday, March 6th, 2026. Today we're going to talk about Volkswagen and Audi, both affected by a serious reliability issue concerning their most popular combustion engine. We'll also discuss new updates about the Striker, Dacia's upcoming station wagon, about the new Bridger, which is an all-terrain 4x4 inspired by Land Rover that Renault will produce, but also about the Chinese brand Xpeng, or Xpeng, say it as you like, which is changing its strategy and launching its first model equipped with a combustion engine in Europe. We'll also talk about Stellantis, which is slashing the prices of its electric vehicles to try to clear out some of its stock. These are the topics of this video for March 6th. I hope you'll find it interesting. If that's the case, as usual, I count on you to show your support by supporting my channel for free. You can do that by leaving a like to boost this video. If the option appears for you, subscribe for the next ones, and of course, leave a comment where you share your opinion about today's news. It's been a while since we had the chance to talk about reliability issues with combustion engines. Well, today we can reset the counters because we're going to talk about Volkswagen and Audi. Both of them are involved in a new class action lawsuit related to a reliability defect in their engine. Unfortunately for them, it's a problem that could become quite significant given the number of vehicles potentially affected. Indeed, the problem concerns one of the engines that was most sold by Volkswagen. Its 2-liter TSI 4-cylinder gasoline engine, which has the codename EA888. So the good news is that it doesn't affect all generations of Volkswagen and Audi that have this engine, because it's an engine that's been around since 2008, but it still affects quite a few different models that were produced from 2018 up to 2026. Models like, for example, the Volkswagen Tiguan, the Volkswagen Passat, and on the Audi side, the Q3, Q5, and even the Q7, knowing that these engines are also found in a whole bunch of other extremely popular models in Europe, like the Golf, for example. Currently, this model isn't considered problematic, but that may change in the coming months. Since it uses the same engine, there's no reason it couldn't be. On the other hand, the Golf is a lot lighter than the SUV or sedan models we just talked about. We know that, in general, a heavier vehicle makes the engine work a lot harder, and an engine that works harder, or is under more strain if you prefer, tends not to age as well. Maybe that's why we don't hear much about these problems with the Golf. So, what exactly is the problem? It's an excessive oil consumption that has been detected, which is said to be due to piston rings that are too thin. To put it simply, the piston rings, they're a kind of metal seal that goes around the pistons in an engine and normally serves to ensure a tight seal between the piston and the cylinder wall. The cylinders that they move through, their main purpose is to scrape off the oil that's present on the walls of the cylinder, to prevent oil from rising into the engine's combustion chamber so that the oil isn't burned along with the fuel during the combustion phases. When that happens, it creates deposits. To put it simply, that's what we call fouling, which in some cases can be more extreme. And that's actually why the 1.2 TCO engine from Renault is very well known. It was one of its biggest reliability problems. This buildup of deposits can cause local overheating, which in turn can lead to the melting of some internal engine parts. And if that happens, the engine is done for. For now at Volkswagen, we haven't reached such extreme cases. But this excessive oil consumption is actually explained by this faulty piston ring, which lets oil pass into a place where it's not supposed to go. This causes two problems. Since the oil doesn't stay in the oil pan empties faster than normal. So you have to top up the oil much more regularly. But above all, it creates, because of the buildup, a whole bunch of other problems. And these problems are exactly what the plaintiffs in this class action have reported. These deposits caused by the burning of oil would eventually build up and could, for example, end up blocking or damaging the PCV valve, which normally serves to expel air from the engine crankcase. A PCV valve that would start to malfunction and cause an increase in pressure in the engine crankcase, which in the long run would lead to the failure of other engine components, such as leaks, for example, in the valve cover gasket or the timing seals, or which can also, for example, create cracks or splits in the oil pan, which, on these models, is not made of metal, but of composite plastic. A whole bunch of problems created by a domino effect, since, in fact, it's one problem that leads to another problem, which leads to yet another problem, which can lead to irregular engine operation, loss of power, and more or less serious breakdowns. In the most extreme cases, potentially a dead engine. Problems that occur quite early in the life of this engine. Cases where it happened at 75 or 80,000 kilometers, which suggests that these aren't maintenance issues, but really problems related to the design of these engines. The problem is that, for now, Volkswagen doesn't want to cover this issue under its manufacturer's warranty. So, we'll see in the coming months how things turn out. This class action, whether the owners who have suffered from these reliability problems will get justice, or if these are just isolated cases, and whether it's due to poor maintenance or bad driving of the vehicle. The problem for Volkswagen is that this isn't the first time this engine has been at the center of criticism. Because remember, last year, there was another class action lawsuit concerning this engine, about the turbo, which started malfunctioning prematurely after just a few thousand kilometers. And in those cases, that class action lawsuit ended with Volkswagen partially covering the cost of the repairs. Still, in any case, European manufacturers will seriously have to look into segmentation problems in their engines. It's true that they're trying to make the segments as small as possible to reduce friction as much as possible, to keep optimizing the fuel consumption of the engines. Segmentation problems appear to be the main issues with this 2-liter TSI engine, and also with the 1.2-liter TCE we discussed earlier. And it was really at the center of the first big Motorgate case, the first major class action lawsuit in France due to an engine reliability problem. If I remember correctly, this is true for Ford's 1-liter EcoBoost and the 1.2-liter PureTech engines. Many believe the issues stem from the timing belt running in oil, but that's not correct. The problem is the faulty piston rings that let oil circulate too freely, which ends up breaking down the timing belt. So, the race to optimize fuel consumption, why not? But if it means facing lawsuits for reliability issues all the time, is it really worth it? Since we're discussing combustion engines, let's mention Xpeng, also called Xpeng in French. This Chinese brand is slowly entering Europe and recently changed its approach. Until now, it only relied on 100% electric vehicles. But seeing that this market is slowing down in Europe, it has finally decided to introduce a combustion engine model there. The first model affected by this strategy will be the G6, for which a new version called the G6 EREV will be launched. This version will be equipped with a 1.5-liter 4-cylinder gasoline engine, which will not directly drive the wheels, but will function as a range extender. Let me remind you of the principle. Basically, it's an electric car whose battery will be recharged in real time by this engine, which will run on gasoline and operate like a generator, producing electricity while the vehicle is driving, consuming gasoline, and the electricity will then recharge the battery for the electric motors. So it's a kind of hypothesis which, in this G6 version, EREV should offer 296 horsepower with a total announced range that combines the fully charged battery at the start and a full gas tank. Around 1,000 km according to the WLTCE cycle, but you should expect a little less because this cycle is still much more optimistic than the European WLTP cycle. Knowing that it will keep the 800 phi architecture from the electric versions of the G6, which will allow it to recharge its electric battery at a fast charging station in just 20 minutes. The only question we don't have an answer to for now is, how much will it cost? But we can assume that the prices will be revealed soon. We also have some news concerning the Renault group. Since Dacia and Renault have just unveiled 2 new models, partially revealed, they will be fully unveiled with a whole lot of information on March 10, 2026, the date when Renault will present its strategic plan for the coming years. While waiting for that date, there is already some information that has been officially released, concerning, for example, the new Dacia Striker. This is the concept that was previously called C-Neo, and it will be a station wagon which will be both a bit bigger and a bit more upscale than the current Jogger, which is another Dacia station wagon. Its exterior design will be that of a raised station wagon, somewhat like an SUV. The rear features an all-new visual signature, which may preview what future Dacia models will display in the coming years, with 2 T-shaped taillights connected by a kind of strip that looks like carbon. But of course, it's not actually carbon. On the technical side, the only thing that's more or less certain is that we should find under its hood the 1-liter turbocharged gasoline engine, which we already know from Dacia, under the hood of the Bigster, which comes in several versions. The 120 horsepower LPG gasoline engine, the 140 horsepower micro-hybrid LPG, but also a slightly larger displacement hybrid engine. A 1-liter gasoline that produces 150 horsepower as a full hybrid. Renault is about to unveil the Bridger, and we have a few small photos of it. Before the official presentation on March 10th, we don't know much about it, except that its length will be 3.99 meters. We're considering a compact 4x4 silhouette vehicle, but it's unclear if it's truly a 4x4, even though we can suspect that the entry-level versions will probably be front-wheel drive, and that all-wheel drive will be available as an option. We don't really know how much it's going to cost, but that's not a real problem because Renault explained that this vehicle would be reserved for the Indian market. And still, there's a good chance that a vehicle like this would sell really well in Europe. It would be too expensive for Renault to adapt it to our safety standards, to our CO2 standards, and it would be very difficult to make it a profitable product for the European markets. And by the way, speaking of the European market, we'll end on that note. Stellantis just announced that they're lowering the price of their electric vehicles so that they're priced similarly to diesel-powered vehicles. We're focusing on commercial electric vehicles, not all electric vehicles. So everything like Doblo, Berlingo will be available through long-term rental offers starting at 129 euros per month. No matter the engine type, whether it's diesel or 100% electric. A strategy put in place by Stellantis, which absolutely has to sell electric commercial vehicles in large numbers to avoid European CO2 fines of several hundred million euros. It's better for Stellantis to sell a lot of them with a very low margin rather than having to pay all those fines. Even though it's cheaper, there's still a problem to solve. For these electric vehicles, the announced range is only 350 km WLTP at most, which is far from the 700 to 800 kilometers that the diesel versions can cover. That's it. We've covered these little news updates for March 6th. I hope you found the video interesting. And if you did, I'm counting on you to show it. As always, please like, subscribe, and consider supporting via the join button for just 99 cents a month. Your support greatly helps my channel. Thanks to those who checked it out. See you tomorrow for the next video. Ciao!